I'm James Winter, the Internet's private investigator. A lot of people ask me, do police make good private investigators? The short answer, sometimes. It's a common misconception that in order to become a private investigator, you should have first been a police officer or otherwise involved in law enforcement. And this is just not true. In fact, the overwhelming majority of private investigators were never police or have any background in law enforcement. I frequently get messages from people stating that they couldn't get hired as a private investigator because they have no law enforcement experience. Just today, I received a message like that from a woman. She said, I've been licensed as a private investigator in Ontario for the past 4 years and haven't been able to get hired because I don't have law enforcement experience. And I didn't want to be the one to give her the bad news. It has nothing to do with your lack of law enforcement experience. There's something else going on. Maybe it's in your resume, maybe it's in your personality. There's something about you that's making it so you can't get those jobs. It has nothing to do with your background of not being in law enforcement or policing. But being a private investigator is a little bit like saying that a person is a lawyer or a doctor or a police officer. What does that mean? If someone says, I'm a lawyer, well, we want to ask, what type of law do you practice? If you're a doctor, what kind of doctor are you? If you're a police officer, what type of work do you do as a police officer? Because it's not very descriptive to say I'm a lawyer, I'm a police officer, or I'm a doctor. There's a lot more detail that would want to be looked at. So private investigations is the same. What type of private investigations do they do? So when we look at this question, do police make good private investigators? We should look at the work that private investigators actually do. Let's focus on two areas of work that private investigators will work in. Number one is surveillance, and number two is investigative interviewing. These are areas that are common in policing, but also common in private investigations. Let's have a look at those two. We're going to start then with surveillance. The first area we're going to look at when we're trying to answer the question, do police make good private investigators, is the area of surveillance. We all know police surveillance in Ontario, they call them spin teams. And those spin teams generally are made up of between 5 and 6 cars, where an officer in each car, police officer in each car, and they're running their surveillance generally against pretty bad people, I imagine, criminals, violent criminals, narcos. And I don't think anyone would argue that they don't need those 5 or 6 cars, right? That these are bad people. They're trying to keep the surveillance cool. They need a bigger team to do that. No problem. Private investigators, though, are running with 1 car. If you're a surveillance investigator, which the vast majority of private investigators are surveillance investigators, when you're a surveillance investigator on your surveillance, it's just you, 1 car, trying to do essentially the same work that a spin team will do with 5 or 6 cars. Now, it's true that the people we're following are not hardened criminals. As a general rule, we're following insurance claimants. Maybe the odd time someone's a cheater, but generally these are insurance claimants. They are WSIB claimants. These are people who have a civil reason for being followed. They're generally not criminals. It could happen, I suppose, but generally no. But the insurance claimant isn't less aware of their surroundings than the criminal. A group of robbers, I would imagine, if they're being surveilled by the police, they're going to be pretty aware of what's happening. But don't kid yourself. Insurance surveillance, WSIB claimants, and even cheaters have got their antenna up. They're also looking for surveillance. So those private investigators doing that surveillance, they're doing that surveillance with just one person. Sometimes there's a second investigator. Sometimes private investigators will run 2 investigators. That's true. That's a lot less than 6. And occasionally, very, very rarely, maybe once every couple of years, I have run surveillance with more than 2, probably less than every couple of years. So it's very unusual that you do surveillance with more than 2. Sometimes you'll do it with 2, but the vast majority of surveillance work done by private investigators is just one guy, you out there alone, trying to do the job that for a police service, they would do that with 5, 6 cars. Another difference is that those police cars, those police officers, they will have the benefit, lots of benefits. They'll have the benefit of running red lights. with impunity, right? Speeding. Every private investigator has nightmares that they're getting stopped for speeding, running lights, or they don't run lights, or they don't speed, right? Because they can't do it and get away with it. The police can absolutely do those things and get away with it. Private investigators don't have that luxury. Another area where police have a significant benefit is in switching off. And what I mean by switching off is that, let's imagine you're on surveillance for a day. You just pick a day, it doesn't matter. And the your setup point is with a view to the subject's residence. Okay, great. View to the subject's residence. The police, in their teams of 5 or 6 cars, they're going to be switching off constantly. One guy's going to be in there having a view. Another guy's going to switch him out, in an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever they decide they need. Then the other guys are going to sort of go out, go afield a little bit, use the washroom, get a bite to eat. Private investigators don't have that because it's just you, right? The private investigator is sitting there for 8, 10, 12, 14 hours and not leaving. So he's got to take care of all of his needs in his vehicle for that 8, 10, 12, 14 hours. All of his food has to be with him. If not, he's hungry. He's got to bring his water with him or else he's going to be thirsty. Using the washroom, he's going to do that in his car. I suppose if it's more than just liquid to pass, he's going to have to make some other arrangement. But generally speaking, the private investigator is alone in his car doing all of everything that he needs by himself in his car. And there's no rest, right? He can't fall asleep because at any moment the subject could leave. The police, in their teams, they can switch out and the guy can go have some rest if he needs that. So there's a big difference. Also, in that switching out, having a view to whatever the subject is up to when they're away from the residence. They leave the residence, private investigator follows, the person goes to Walmart. The private investigator has to arrive at Walmart with the subject, capture a video of the subject go into Walmart, document the subject inside Walmart, and then come out of Walmart and get the subject again. That's all done by one guy. With police spin teams, there would be any number of police officers, 5, 6 guys doing those different jobs among a number of people. A private investigator is just out there doing it alone. And then possibly most importantly is the following. With police spin teams, they're going to have 5 or 6 cars following the subject of their investigation. Again, they're following sometimes hardened criminals, organized criminals, robbers, murderers, narcos, whatever. Everyone understands why they need those 5 or 6 guys. We're not arguing that. What I'm saying, though, is that a private investigator who's following somebody with no less level of awareness than that criminal that's being followed, the private investigator is out there alone. When the police are switching off constantly, the subject of their investigation is not seeing the same Ford Bronco or whatever in the rear view mirror, such as they would with a private investigator. They're seeing the car switch off. Today it's a Honda, or at this intersection, it's a Honda Civic behind. At the next intersection, it's a Mazda SUV. They're constantly switching off. Whereas with a private investigator, it's just your car. It's just you that person is going to see in the rearview mirror. You have to develop tactics to avoid being spotted. And private investigators do have a series of tactics that they use. One of their tactics is not to switch off with another vehicle, because there is no other vehicle. It's just you. That's a very high level of surveillance. If you know of a surveillance investigator who's not getting burned every week, then you know a pretty good surveillance guy. These are real road warriors, excuse me, and they have developed over their years of experience real sound techniques for not being spotted. So, to address our question, do police make good private investigators? That police officer who spent the last 15 years on a OPP spin team is going to have to make a serious transition from having worked with a team of guys up to 6 other investigators, impunity, running lights, no problems with speeding, no threat of tickets, no threat of his insurance rates going through the roof, resting occasionally while on surveillance to not resting at all those hours just You have all the responsibility, developing techniques for being behind a subject the entire day, and that could last for several days in a row. That police officer now transitioning to private investigations is going to have to make that switch. And that is not an easy switch. This is where we lose the police officers. Sorry, this is where we lose the police officers who become private investigators. Some can do it. I'm absolutely certain. I know some who've made that switch. They've gone from having the teams, they've gone from having the impunity, breaking traffic laws, to having the support of other officers, to now being the sole person, having all that responsibility, not resting, not leaving to use the washroom, not leaving to get something to eat, something to drink, to being there, being focused. But that's a pretty big transition for people to make. And I'm telling you, not a lot of people can make that transition. So, do police make good private investigators in when transitioning to PI work in surveillance? Not a lot. Now, we all know people who've done it. Talk to any PI, they're going to know cops who were cops before, long career as cops, and now they're private investigators doing surveillance and they're having a successful career. I know people like that, but I don't know a lot of them. And the second area we're going to look at in answer to the question, do police make good private investigators, is the area of investigative interviewing. Of course, police are very experienced at conducting investigative interviews as police officers, but it's a very different type of work when you do investigative interviews as a private investigator. Let's look into it. Police officers have spent their entire careers wearing police uniforms, carrying police badges, carrying firearms, and driving in police marked vehicles. These I would describe as symbols of police authority. Furthermore, the police have extraordinary powers, and particularly the power of arrest, that they can leverage when encountering the public and conducting investigations. In Canada, generally Canadians have a very positive view of police. They respect them largely and are generally inclined to cooperate with police when police are conducting criminal investigations. And the result is that the police have become accustomed to entering into investigations and expecting the population to cooperate with them on the whole. Of course, there's exceptions, and of course, there's lots of people who don't like police and won't cooperate with police. But on the whole, Canadians view police as the good guys and are generally willing to cooperate with police during their investigations. Private investigators have a very different experience. Private investigators, on the other hand, have no badges, no uniforms, no firearms, no police vehicles. There are no signs of authority at all backing up the private investigator. Speaking about backup, there's no group of backup officers a microphone click away for private investigators. They're out there on their own with no authority, no extraordinary powers of anything at all. And generally, the public has a, if not a negative view of private investigators, they don't have a favorable view of private investigators. And often they're disinclined to cooperate with our investigations. And I'll give you a brief example. The police, they're out there, and imagine there was a break-in at a house. The police might do something that they would call a canvass. They'll canvass the neighborhood, go knock on people's doors, and ask them if they saw anything, and see if they can get some information, maybe check the ring cameras, whatever they would do. They'll knock on people's doors and talk to them. Private investigators have something similar. We have something that we would call a neighborhood inquiry, and private investigators will go, same thing, go to the neighbors, knock on the door, and start asking them questions. When the police do it, Canadians, again, are generally inclined to cooperate with the police investigation and generally willing to speak to the police in order to do their civic duty and help out. When a private investigator knocks on those doors, they very often, and I would say most often, get those doors closed in their faces. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying that's normal. The population is very often disinclined to cooperate with private investigations. So, how do private investigators get people to speak to us, get people to cooperate with our investigations, stay at the door, not slam the door in our faces? Well, we do that by developing various techniques to entice people to speak to us, to make them more cooperative. For example, investigators will develop a certain charisma or a charm. Definitely humor helps. They need to have a sincere interest in the person that they're speaking to, as well as a concern for the outcome of the investigation. These skills can, of course, be maintained by police and developed by them as well. But they must be developed by the private investigator because without them, the investigator has nothing. The PI has nothing if he doesn't have this charm, this charisma, this humor, this ability to get people to open up. Because what the private investigator doesn't have is the authority of the police, the mystique, and the cultural respect that the police have. The investigator has the opposite of that often. So he only has his ability to be charming, to have charisma, and get people to open up to him. Now, none of this is to say that the police don't also have these characteristics of charm and charisma, humor, and sincerity. I'm sure many of them do. Many of them probably have those characteristics naturally. Some have developed those characteristics doing the work of the police detective. But the private investigator must have them. The private investigator has nothing else to fall back on. While many police can do their jobs just fine and do their jobs just fine without developing those soft personal skills that private investigators must have. So, to the police officers who have those skills naturally, to those who have developed them in their work, they have those transferable skills. They're going to do just great as private investigators. But to those who didn't, for those who relied on their authority or their uniforms or they respect the cultural respect that Canadians have, that they're inclined to cooperate with police, those police officers, when they become private investigators, will struggle. So, how do we answer the question, do police make good private investigators? Well, sometimes they do. Lots of police are able to successfully make the transition into private investigation work and cope with the fewer resources, the more self reliance, lack of authority, and different cultural attitudes. But lots of police are not able to make that transition. And for that reason, there's no requirement for new private investigators to have a background in law enforcement or policing because it just doesn't help. I'm James Winter. I teach private investigators to be more successful in their careers. If you're interested in becoming a private investigator, or if you're interested in advancing your career as a current private investigator, reach out to me, www.jameswinter.ca, and I'll see you in the next video.